LinkedIn presents.
Are you your own best friend or your worst enemy? I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we do both better?
The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by SAP. Harness the power of AI across your business and achieve results that are relevant, reliable, and responsible with SAP Business AI. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
I'm Tomer Cohen, LinkedIn's Chief Product Officer. In my new podcast, Building One, I interview some of the best product builders out there. People at the intersection of dreaming and building and learning. Together, you and I will learn from their experiences. If you're just as curious as I am, follow Building One wherever you listen, and check out the conversation on LinkedIn.
A lot of us, especially those of us who are high achieving, are really hard on ourselves. We are our enemies. Silencing our inner critic and instead focusing on what we do well, what we love to do, is really hard. But there are strategies we can all use at work, regardless of where we are on our mental health journey, to help quiet that inner critic, improve how we feel about ourselves, and of course, improve our leadership. I always say we spend far too much time as leaders trying to fix what people have told is wrong with us. This is especially true with the leaders I work with who might have mental illness or mental health challenges or be neurodivergent. And we don't spend enough time doing what we love to do, what we do best. Here's a hint. What if you took something that you usually think of as a weakness, and maybe people have told you it's a weakness, and instead realize, this is my hidden superpower. Today, I'm talking with advisor and legendary coach, Sanyin Siang. She is an adjunct professor at Duke University, where she leads the Fuqua Coach K Leadership and Ethics Center. And more importantly, Siang has a framework that I think we can all learn something from, the idea of superpowers. For those of us who struggle with our mental health, we're neurodivergent, our brains just work differently, this is especially important. We have so many gifts, but they might even be hidden, because work isn't set up for us or because our inner critics are out of control. So I find this framework so powerful in my day-to-day work, especially on the days that I'm feeling down and I am really mad at my tricky brain. Here's my conversation with Sanyin. Your own personal experience, I found this quote of something that you wrote. You said, I'm a natural introvert with a studious nature, and you always believed your greatest strengths were about heads down work, like writing or laboratory science. But a friend told you that one of your innate, and I know personally, most powerful strengths is connecting with people. How did that information change your life?
So growing up, I was very studious and still am. I'm kind of a nerd. I am a nerd. Forget the kind of. And I love learning from books. But I was also very shy, and I didn't think I could be good with people. And when I got this job, I was told I have to engage with chief executives
At Duke.
And I thought, well, how do I engage with them? Maybe I'll just ask them questions. I'll just engage and learn from them and try to find out interesting things about them. It then got reframed from how do I engage with them to how do I discover the awesomeness in other people. And I realized discovering the awesomeness in people is similar to discovering the awesomeness in books. And everybody has something extraordinary. But I didn't realize I was good at it until much later when someone said, wow, Sanyin, you're a natural connector. And at first I was really taken aback and said, I don't want to be a connector. A connector isn't about, I want to be brilliant. A connector is just a human Rolodex. And it wasn't until much later that this friend, I was talking with her, because that's the beauty of having people, friends, community to be able to speak with. And that's actually a core aspect of superpowers work. I said, well, why do people keep calling me a super connector? I don't want to be that. And she said, hold on, why not? But I explained to her, well, connectors just put people together. And she said, wait a minute. In order to put people together so that that relationship actually sustains, she said, what's your percentage rate of when you connect two people and say they must meet, they actually meet and they continue meeting? That's a very high. She said, that's unusual because what you're doing is you have to understand what each person is about, look at beneath the surface level values and interests, and you also see the bigger context. So when you make that connection, even though it may not seem the most intuitive type of connection for people on the surface, it actually clicks. And when she said that, it made a lot of sense. And so one of the tenets of superpowers is we may have innate superpowers that we don't even realize we have because the context for expressing them have not yet arisen. Superpowers have to be in context. In some contexts, this capability can be a superpower. In other contexts, it can be kryptonite. Context matters. And we forget, because we're so individualized, we forget it's us in the context of who we are around, as well as what is it that we're trying to accomplish and what is happening in the world around us.
Well, I think also you hit on something else that you write a lot about, which is that a lot of us, especially those of us who are very driven in our work and ambitious and we care, we're really focused on what we think we should be and what we want to be, that we bypass
Yes.
what our sort of, as you say, natural innate gifts are. When you said, I want to be brilliant, like I can't tell you how much that resonated with me because as host of this show, as an author, speaker, advocate, educator, I spend most of my days thinking, I want a PhD. I want to be a clinical professor. I want to be this person who's so much smarter than me. And I rarely spend a minute and think, wait a minute, maybe your job is not to be that brilliant academic, but my own anxiety, imposter syndrome, everything, worst enemyness just wants me to always be not who I am sometimes.
Well, and okay, let's look at you as an example, because I think one of your many superpowers is the ability to lower people's walls so that they can be authentic and they can be vulnerable, right? That's why your show is so successful, because it's not only brilliant people sharing ideas and insights, but they're sharing themselves. They're bringing themselves, and you bring that out in people. And that's your brilliance. Not everyone can do that. And then two, you're able to translate what they say in a way that really connects with the audience. You bridge. And that too is brilliance. What I was hearing you say there is part of it is we have to maybe reframe the expectations of ourselves, but also reframe what is good, what is valuable. And a big part of the superpowers work is this reframing of assume instead of saying, well, does this person have a superpower? Does this person have a gift? What if, with work, with anyone we're engaging with, our perspective starts with the belief that I believe because you're a human being, you have a gift, because we're made that way. More than one gift. Let's discover what that is. Let's assume the gift is there. Let's assume the superpower is there. And now let's discover it. Instead of trying to say, well, I have a list of superpowers.
Right.
And are you fitting into this list or that list? That's why I'm very deliberate in my work on superpowers not to come up with a list. Because that discovery of what that superpower is actually from, if it's one of our biggest blind spots, we need others to help us discover what it is. But it's co-created in that, co-shaped, co-framed in that dynamic between you and the person who's sharing it with you.
How do you define a superpower?
I define it as differentiating strengths. People might often ask, what's the difference between a strength and a superpower? This example. I can put together a nice PowerPoint deck. It is grueling work. It does not energize me. I derive no joy from it. And yet I can do it so it can be a strength. There's others for whom it takes them a second and they come up with this beautiful deck that translates exactly the ideas that I'm trying to put on the page. So superpowers energize you. That doesn't mean they're easy. It may be that you work on something using it and it can be hours, but it feels like a second because there's a joy, there's an energy you get from it. It can also be something that you have practiced so much that becomes an instinct. But it's differentiating and it's core to who you are and therefore it's energizing.
And the thing that's interesting to loop back is the context again. I was thinking about Clayton Lord, who's an executive I interviewed recently, who's on the autism spectrum and has an incredible superpower, which is really, really valuable in a lot of situations, which he can take a lot of chaos and tons of information and a messy, messy project that feels overwhelming to everyone else and be like, boop, boop, boop. This is what we do. I mean, that is, and I don't imply to make him sound like a computer. That's not what I meant. It's that he can literally see it. He can see it. He can make the
connection
and make it into something that is doable. And everyone around him breathes a sigh of, I feel his superpower so viscerally. But he said to me, sometimes that's my Achilles heel because I go in too deep and people get overwhelmed or they think that I'm being too intense in my feedback or it's just too much and it's not the right time and place. And it took him a lot of trial and error and honestly good managers to help him understand this is your superpower, but yes, you have to modulate it as well.
What I'm hearing there is it's a superpowers fit. We don't think about superpowers fit. We think about culture fit when we're connecting ourselves with careers, but we also have to think about superpowers fit, which means in what context is this thing perceived as a value? So, for example, if you are incredibly meticulous, dot the I's, cross the T's, that meticulousness will be a superpower, say in regulatory affairs, a law firm, quality assurance. In a startup, chaotic environment where 70% right is good enough because we're iterating, that might be kryptonite. So that superpowers fit is so important. And then two, what the magic of that story you just shared is he wasn't operating in a silo. He had feedback from others to say, hey, because one of the things is we don't know something is a superpower because it comes easily to us. We do it without, it's in second nature. It's either instinctive or so innate. We do it without thinking. When something comes easily to us, we think everyone else has it too. And therefore, you think, with the example of your guest that you just talked about, he might be thinking, why isn't everyone making these connections that quickly? Am I surrounded by idiots? But no, you're not surrounded by idiots. That's just normal. But unless we get that feedback, we won't know. Know that the thing that comes easily to you may not be the thing that comes easily to everyone else. So once we know that, then we can be more patient. Because now we're working under a different assumption. Because now we know this is a superpower. So let's go back to the connections part. So I was making connections and introductions. It comes easily. Like, well, this person should meet with this person. Let me make the introduction about why. And there was a point where I became frustrated with, well, why aren't they responding in kind and connecting me with other people? Because they're wired differently. That's not how they think. That's not what comes naturally. But until someone told me that that is actually a superpower, it changed my thinking. And I became a lot more patient with other people around that particular aspect. So you think about all the things that we are good at that come easily to us. We think it's our everyday normal. And by the way, we talked about being our own best friends. Somehow we're taught in society to only value things when it's hard. Sometimes you should value things when it's easy.
God, that's so true.
That's so valuable. That's our gift. It's easy. Or I think, oh, I can make connections and introductions all day, or I can connect ideas all day. And why should I be paid for this? Well, because we can do it faster, easier than most people. So we should also value what's easy. That's a way of becoming our own best friend instead of saying to ourselves, oh my gosh, like Sanyin, you're such an idiot. Why can't you get this thing right? Because it's hard to say, well, Sanyin, wow, bravo. This thing you're doing, hey, that adds value. That's a beauty of understanding our superpowers.
Oh, love that. One of the theories in my new book, which is a guide for people who have superpowers, and one of the ways that I'm thinking about it is you're really wonderful at your craft. There's no one better at your chosen craft. But you might not be so great at your job. Because your job is people and politics and bureaucracy and answering emails and task management and task completion and blah, 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 blah. I think, again, it's almost something around using that superpower wisely, but how do you reach a point where you can exercise your superpower because you have the permission and a structure to do it? You're in the right job. You mentioned being in the right context, and people trust you, because that's where we get stuck.
Yeah. We also tend to be in the wrong job because we think linearly about a ladder going upwards. So say you are a phenomenal chief financial officer. That's your superpower. But the next step people think is, well, you go from, chief anything, right? Chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, chief strategy officer. The next step is to be CEO, which requires something completely different, something everyone else can relate to. We have great teachers. So they think the next step up is for that teacher to be a principal. Uses completely different skills. And in fact, we have a friend who is a teacher who was principal of a great school here and did a marvelous job, but discovered that he actually misses teaching. So came back to be a teacher. So we have to stop thinking in terms of linear ladders up, but thinking more like jungle gyms. Instead of saying, okay, what is the next status step? Because we're all wired that way. Well, the next step of the ladder is this, and then after CEO, well, it's maybe a board director, when you may not enjoy being a public board director, right? But instead of thinking about it as, are there situations where I can stretch and I can grow, and I can maybe discover other superpowers I didn't realize I have, right? And then how do I layer on the thing that I have? So when I got this job, a lot of it was, I have an ethics background. It was translation. I have my MBA here at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And then it was layers and layers. Every 3 years, I take on learning something new. The first 3 years was, how do we convene groups of CEOs at the highest levels? And how does that conversation work? And how does that play out? And then we're getting all these insights. All right, let's learn social media and LinkedIn. And then it becomes experimentation. I have the same job title for the last 20 years, but it's not been the same job, right? And I think one of the things is we think about a job as static. What do we think about it as more fluid? But what we're bringing to it is we're molding that fit with us too. It's about differentiating. How we're going to do this job is going to be different than how another person's going to do this job, but you're bringing you.
When we're thinking about the right job for us, say we know our superpower and we feel passionate, we see a need for it. If your work life was a pie chart, what percentage of your time would you say is ideal to be actually doing your superpower? So say that you are an engineer and you're considering a job and you're like, writing code is my superpower. Because no job, I mean, there are more, but rarely, and to your point, especially as we progress, the percentage of your day that you're actually doing your applied skill is less. So what's the right fit?
I think about that in a fluid way. So let's
Okay.
say that engineer who's coding. Well, one, he wouldn't have to spend a lot of time coding to be able to generate the impact.
Hmm.
However, we also don't want to be boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
We might have other superpowers we haven't yet discovered. That engineer might also be brilliant at mentoring and teaching. But unless he or she has had that also other time to try those out and test those out, they may not discover those other superpowers. And I think that would be one of the great tragedies if we go through life leaning in on only, one particular superpower when we have so many others.
Or strengths, right? They don't have to be superpowers, maybe.
I think living life like a scientist.
Yeah.
I heard this once. I think maybe it's from Amy Edmondson, where we have to experiment and test, and then we're getting the feedback data on us, and we're discovering, oh, I never knew I could do that. Hey, that might be interesting to try out. And I think in today's world, people are shifting careers all the time. So that engineer, their ability to write code might be based on a superpower that's about turning numbers into something. Could be in a different type of job where it's not particularly code, but it's something else.
That's a really good point. Although it's funny, I don't know if maybe it's maybe it's the neurodivergent in me was like, I just want to do what I'm good at and love all day long. I always feel like I'm being interrupted and I hate it.
Okay, so Morra, let's talk about that, right? So the reason why I don't want to have a list of superpowers, because there may be some description about it that we don't yet have words or phrases for.
Yeah.
My work right now isn't just about analytical superpowers, so physical superpowers, but it's this idea of relational superpowers, which we don't have language for. And that's about someone who comes in and brings up the joy capital. It could be someone who comes in and they know how to glue the team together, or they're incredibly empathetic and they know how to center the team during crisis. Right? Those are incredibly valuable, and yet we don't yet have the language for that. And it can also be virtue superpowers, like curiosity. It can be integrity. It can be courage, which you also have an abundance of. But we don't think about those things as superpowers that we can practice and that we are shaped by also the people we are around. You think about relational and virtue superpowers. So I think about, say, this idea of you knowing how to lower people's walls, get them to be their authentic selves. You always know who your audience is. So you're turning to your audience as we're talking, and you're saying to them, okay, so for those of us who are neurodivergent, here's what this means, X, Y, and Z, and here's how this connects. All right, so that particular superpower, or set of combinational superpowers, it works beautifully as a podcast. It works beautifully as an author, because you have to interview people and then create the story and then translate that. It works beautifully. I bet you are a phenomenal facilitator. And so those are 3 different types of jobs, but you're using the same superpowers in them. So I think that's how it might be fun to think about superpowers in that way.
Tired of AI hype without results? SAP Business AI isn't just talk. It's embedded across SAP solutions, driving immediate impact for your organization. From Joule, your digital assistant, to AI-powered capabilities throughout the SAP portfolio, SAP Business AI helps you make confident decisions based on your own data, all while maintaining the highest security and privacy standards for growth-focused businesses. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Hey, I'm Michael Kovnat, host of The Next Big Idea Daily. The show is a masterclass in better living from some of the smartest writers around. Every morning, Monday through Friday, we'll serve up a quick 10-minute lesson on how to strengthen your relationships, supercharge your creativity, boost your productivity, and more. Follow The Next Big Idea Daily wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, one of the things that you've written is that high achievers have a bad habit. We fixate on the negative. And we've touched on this a little bit. Again, we love to talk about what we're not good at or what we could be better about or what Ted is better about than us. If you want to cut through this and say, stop, I want you to do this exercise, do what Sanyin tells you to do, and discover your superpowers. Where do I start?
All right. So first, I want all the people who are listening out there to know, and I think, Morra, you'll probably agree with this too. We write books not because we are the blazing experts and we have answers. We write books because we're in search of answers to questions that we desperately want answers to.
100%.
So for superpowers, it's because I look at everyone else and it's so easy for me to look in awe and sometimes with a bit of envy at other people's superpowers. And I think, well, what do I have to offer? Right? And then we start comparison trapping ourselves. And that's not a good place to be. And I thought, wait a minute, if I have this problem, maybe other people might have it too. But if I believe everyone has a superpower, an extraordinary gift, then if that's true, then it must also be true that I also have superpowers. So how do I discover what mine are? And so the first thing when we don't have the answer to something is ask. So when I started on this, I remember turning to my mentor, one of my dearest mentors in the world, Simsikin, who's also the Mike Krzyzewski Leadership Chair professor here at the university, one of the top scholars in the world. And it's from him I learned a leadership framework. And we don't ask this question because we're taught if we're asking what makes us good, it's like we're fishing for compliments. So instead we ask, where can we improve on?
Always.
And then if they tell us something good, we believe it for like a second and they're like, oh, okay, they must be just being none. Tell me, what are my deficiencies? What can I work on? What can I improve on? What can I make it better? It would be good to know what is it that we should be doubling down on.
Yeah.
So I picked up the phone. This was during the early days of COVID. And I said to Sam, hey, Sam, I don't know what I bring to the table. Can you give me some ideas on what, I think I might have even used the word superpowers, that what my superpowers are, what I bring that's different? Because I look at him and I think, wow, he can cite research just like that. Like his brain is like an entire library of research papers. And he said, Sanyin, what are you talking about? You bring emotion into ideas.
You do.
And I have no idea what that meant. I'm like, it sounds good, but let me hold on to that. And let me test that out. I still don't know what that means, Morra. Even with you in agreement, I don't know, but I know there's something there about what I bring. Maybe it's heart. So maybe I'll bring more heart into conversations. And that started the path. And so the first thing to do is ask. And now here's the trick. People don't stop and tell you what your superpowers are because it's so obvious to the rest of us what your superpowers are. And so we think, oh, Morra knows her superpower is, enabling people to be authentic, one of her many superpowers. I don't have to tell Morra that because it's so obvious. She must know it too. The thing is, it's obvious to us. It's not obvious to them. It goes back to the start of our conversation about the things that come easily to us, the things that are obvious, not so obvious to everyone else. So ask.
Ask who? Because that was a very vulnerable conversation for you to go. Was he your boss or just your mentor?
He started off as my boss and now he's my mentor, but we are teammates together in the center. So you're right. You are so good at catching on that. It takes as much vulnerability to ask for feedback about what makes us better as it does to ask for feedback about what makes us good, right? Both require a great deal of vulnerability. And actually, I think it's more courageous. It takes more courage in our society. And by the way, to sit there and listen to them say it without disagreeing with them or discounting it, I think someone's giving you a gift. Like how many times when someone said, oh, Morra, you're amazing, you're brilliant. And you're like, no. So you're right. It is very hard. So start with people who know you, who trust. And guess what? Because we know when we practice, it becomes easier. There might be people who might say, oh, I have to think about that. And then when they come back, now they're looking for what makes you succeed. That's also a thing too, right? You're anchoring people in what makes you succeed and helping to see what you bring. And by the way, flip it around. If it's hard for us to see what our superpowers are, and it's not obvious to us, it's not obvious to everyone, be the person that helps people discover what their superpowers is. And by the way, when we do that, I write about imposter syndrome. My best antidote to imposter syndrome is we may not always control whether someone helps us feel that sense of belonging, but we can control two things. We can control creating that sense of belonging for ourselves, which is really hard. The angle into that is create a sense of belonging for others. We can be in a room, someone new may be coming in, and no matter, they may be top executive, but they're new to the organization. Make them feel they belong. Minimize imposter syndrome for them by highlighting what makes them extraordinary. It works every time.
Absolutely. And it's a gift. Like you said, it's a gift to give people. What a gift to hear how I'm reflected in the eyes of someone that I care about and whose opinion I value and who knows me.
It's easy for us to share that with others, and it makes it a lot easier for us to ask that about ourselves because they know with what intention we're giving it, and they know with what intention we're asking.
Are there other more process-driven or experiential ways to discover your superpowers on your own? Can you sort of get curious and play detective?
So reflection is really important in any leadership journey. And by the way, can we redefine productivity? We're in a hyper-productive world. I was having a conversation with my friend Jeff Jones, who is the CEO of H&R Block, and he said, why don't we redefine productivity as a commitment to becoming our better selves? I thought, wow, that is true productivity, right?
Yes.
It is about a commitment to becoming our better selves. And I will add on that, how we become our best selves is when we help others flourish, right? So that's where the superpowers angle comes in. But I think it has to be a combination because the trick with blind spots is we can reflect our way out of blind spots. We actually have to have data in through an experience that engages with the outside world or with something that's different, or getting that data directly from people. However, what we can do is notice what are the things I'm doing. So when I work with people on their transitioning, say, from CEO to their next chapter, one of the things is your time. Suddenly you have this abundance of time, and that can be overwhelming.
A lot of anxiety.
A lot of anxiety because you were used to having our time and schedule, everything's scheduled for us. So now we have this abundance of time. What do we do with it? Well, one is notice what are the things that energize you? What are the things that when you sit down and work on something, you realize, wow, I can't believe 5 hours just flew by. It doesn't mean that it was easy. It could be challenging, and you can't stop thinking about it. Those are clues. I can't stop thinking about, oh, this person should really talk to this person. That should have been a clue, right? Or I also love house renovations because there's a beginning, middle, and end. Well, in our work, we may not see the ends of our input. Renovations, there's a beginning, middle, and end. Same thing with baking. And so sometimes I can't help thinking through reconfigurations of where the kitchen cabinet should be, just for kicks and giggles. So there's something about that. So those are the things you can be aware of. What is it that I'm doing that I can't wait to do more of or share with other people or bring other people along with me to engage in this? Those are all clues. Now you combine those set of clues with what people are telling you, inject emotion into ideas. I don't know what that means. But that you, for example, I share that you're like, oh yes. I'm like, okay, at some point I will love to say, what does that mean, Morra? But it's a signal that maybe what is it I'm doing? That might be perhaps injecting emotion into ideas.
Can I tell you what I think?
Yes.
Well, and again, I don't know you that well, but I think what they're really saying is that power of human connection. Is you have this almost magic ability to have someone feel like you really see them and they're in a safe plane with you emotionally, and that you then, because of your big knowledge base and your brilliance, you can pull down the right idea for them given what they need. And that's why you're better than an expert, because experts just tell you their expertise no matter what. You may be having the worst day of your life and feeling like terrible, and they're still going to give you the same old expertise. But you don't do that. You see the person, you understand them, you dial in, and you sort of pull down what they need at that time. That's what I think he meant.
That will go on my happy wall for the times when I'm like really sad and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm not making an impact at all. I would need to hear that. So thank you.
And again, it's easy for you. You couldn't not do it.
Well, that's an answer to your question. A superpower is something you could not do because it's so much a part of you that once you have the opportunity to express it, you could not do. And the thing is, how do we discover more superpowers? It's engaging with different. Because when we engage with different, right? And here's what I mean by different. It could be when we travel. Haven't you noticed when we travel, we start noticing the nuances of our own culture? When we learn a new language, that's when we start understanding the nuances of our own language, because now we're seeing in contrast, right? And when we engage with different, it makes our own world bigger. And it also deepens ourselves. It's like we're expanding outwardly and we're also expanding inwardly. And so bringing it back to this conversation around neurodivergence, when we engage with neurodivergence, we expand our world because we see things from different lenses. And boy, we're in a world where there's the playbooks our predecessors operated by no longer work. We are desperate to see things through different lenses. We have to. It's a new world. We need different. We need neurodivergent. We need divergent.
Let me ask you my last question then. And this is a serious question, and it's based on a lot of data. A lot of different superpowers, hidden superpowers, are needing their perfect fit. They're a puzzle piece, and their edges are different than some of the round holes that jobs like to place us in. And I often think that there are a lot of us who have superpowers in search of a home. What's your advice, either for the person who's seeking the home or for employers who need new thinking to make the fit?
I think we have more agency than we think to create that fit. What I mean by that is they may not yet see the value, but if we have confidence this has value, right? So that's one, knowing that we have value and helping them see. And then two, instead of being angry that they don't see, be patient. Because a lot of times when there's not this immediate visible fit, but there's value being added, it can be very frustrating. And we think it's unfair. It's whatever word you want to put in. And I've been there. I've been there because I'm different in so many ways. But the thing is to be patient with the other people, because if you're frustrated, you add that frustration on top, then it doesn't do anyone any good. But if you're understanding why they see the things that they see, whatever in leadership, whatever you want them to do, you have to do first. Want them to trust you, you have to trust first. You want them to see things from your point of view, start with being curious and seeing things from their point of view. That opens up the dialogue. Because we may be operating as different. We only ever known ourselves. Therefore, we're operating under a whole bunch of assumptions that everyone else may not be operating under. So we have to get in that dialogue. As an immigrant, I discovered that really fast. It's like you're immediately different. And that's the thing, is it's dialogue and collaboration. It's this idea that I'm wrapping the superpowers work in, around the idea of witness, WITH, that the way to discover our superpowers, the way to make the biggest possible difference in the world is with others. With.
That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew, with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app, leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the Anxious Achiever world. Until next time.